and LSU. And to talk SEC basketball, let's visit with Mark Wise on the Farm Bureau guest line. Check out favorites.com and go with the home team, Mississippi Farm Bureau. How about that fitting bump music for a guy that calls Gainesville, Florida home also? You like that?
That's really impressive with a little Tom Petty there, yes.
Are we excited, Mark, about this particular SEC tournament?
Yeah, I mean, what's there not to like in terms of if you had told me in October that the 7-10 game was going to be Auburn against Arkansas, I think you could have gotten a lot of money from me on that. So from that standpoint, I'm looking forward to that. And then, of course, that winner would come out and play Texas A&M, and you've got Kentucky on that side of the bracket. So there's all kinds of good juice. You know, Mississippi State on the bubble. I think if they beat Florida, I think they're safely in. There's two ways if you're in Mississippi State's position. I think you can get in if you're on the bubble, and they're on the right side of the bubble. Is that you just win, and you don't care what people do around you. But it doesn't hurt that those around you get beat as well. So, like, for instance, I know Pittsburgh's in a tight game with Georgia Tech right now. Mississippi State fans, you need to be Georgia Tech fans this afternoon, and so on and so forth.
Joe Lunardi's actually moved Mississippi State up in his most recent edition of Bracketology. He has moved them to the last four buys spot, so they've got a little bit of wiggle room. I am curious, when you look at Mississippi State's resume, they go 8-10 in the league. They have two really good non-conference wins going back to November over Marquette and Utah, and those have held up for the entire season. Does Mississippi State look to you? I'm going eye test here. Do they look like an NCAA tournament team?
Well, on one side of the floor, they certainly do. I'm not sure on the offensive end, but physically, the way they defend, the way they go the offensive glass, the physicality of the front court in terms of Matthews and Jeffries and Smith, I think are exceptional. But when you struggle as much as they have at different times this year, with especially shooting the three ball, some nights they really do look like a team, and some nights they don't. I agree with you. I think they're in a good position in terms of those 4 quad one wins. That Marquette win just keeps looking better and better. Remember, though, league record doesn't come into play in terms of evaluating one's resume. I just know they will be much better off and in a much safer place if they beat Florida in that opener tomorrow. I think it's a horrible matchup for Florida in terms of without Castleton, because of the physicality I just mentioned. Florida was an average at best rebounding team with Castleton. They have been a poor rebounding team since. Now, what they are willing to do is shoot more threes, and that's where you come into danger. The genesis of all upsets, in my view, I think if Florida beats Mississippi State, it would be a little bit of an upset. The genesis of all those kinds of upsets starts at the arc.
Mark, I want to talk to you about Vanderbilt for a second. I keep looking at what they've done down the stretch, and not just the fact that they've won games, but who they've beaten. And I'm not talking about a win against South Carolina or a win against Ole Miss, in the second half of the season. I'm talking about a home win against Tennessee. I'm talking about a road win against Kentucky, the big wins that Vanderbilt has had. And yet Vanderbilt's not only not in, they're like the 8th team out.
Right.
How do we get to a point where, and we know the reason they're out, right? I mean, they've got 3 bad losses.
Yeah,
How do we get to a point where your wins matter more than your losses, or should they?
No, but they are equal. So those losses in November and December are just as powerful as those wins in late in the year. I think we saw this with Texas A&M last year, where Texas A&M just had so far to go. Now, the difference between Texas A&M last year and Vandy this year, and it's a big difference, Vandy will get bonus points for their scheduling. Non-conference strength of schedule in the top 20, their overall strength of schedule in their top 10. Remember, Texas A&M I think their non-conference strength of schedule last year was somewhere in the 2000s. So they had to overcome that, and that was a stain that they could not get rid of. Vanderbilt's in a different situation, but you also have to remember the committee now, and I get it. I did the Kentucky game. I was shocked as anybody once they lost Robbins and were still able to win in Rupp.
Yeah.
But they're going to be evaluated without Robbins, and unfortunately, they also have some losses earlier in the SEC season without Robbins.
Is the LSU loss? They were on that 5-game win streak. They lost that game, and then they won 2 or 3 more to win 8 of the last 9 at the end. Is that the difference in them being in and not in right now?
No, I don't think that's a killer. I think it would be them getting closer. Remember, they've still got 7 or 8, even in Joe's latest, I think they've got 7 or 8 teams in front of them.
Yep.
They've continued to climb. I think the only way Vanderbilt's in, I think, is if they beat Kentucky again. Because they've just got – remember, everybody tends to forget this. It's also the other teams around you on the bubble. What are they doing? So they would have to if they had beaten LSU, they might be 3 or 4 spots higher, but that would probably be it.
So Vanderbilt is going to have to beat either Georgia or LSU and then turn around and on Friday night beat Kentucky in Nashville. And if they do those two things, you think they're in?
I do think they're in if they beat those 2 things, but my goodness, what a bad break in terms of a draw, having to maybe play Kentucky. Now, again, Richard, we've done games together. One of the key ingredients, I think, for a team at tournament time is to be healthy. And who knows if Wallace, Frederick, or Wheeler are going to play for Kentucky. That certainly would impact them. We know that, and this is, I can't remember more late injuries in this conference than what we've seen this year in terms of Castleton, Robbins, Ziegler, the Kentucky issues that I talked about. So far, the team that I think has kind of avoided that and is sitting pretty in the top half of the draw is the chalk, and that would be Alabama.
Yeah, they have had their own issues, but injuries have not plagued them this season. I want to go back to something you said at the beginning. You said you would have lost a lot of money if you had bet on Auburn as the 7 seed and Arkansas as the 10 seed, and those 2 teams playing in the 3rd game of the 2nd day of the tournament. Who are you more surprised by, that Auburn fell to the 7 or that Arkansas is the 10?
Arkansas is the 10. Now, I didn't know that they were going to have to play the vast majority of the season without Nick Smith Jr. I don't think anybody did. And certainly that he takes them to a different talent level. And everybody wants to go, well, Arkansas lost the last 3 games of their season. Yeah, but did you see who they played? I mean, it wasn't like they got upset on any of those 3, 2 of the 3 on the road. And then Kentucky goes in there and Reeves just lights them up for 37. I still think they have a chance to be a dangerous team in the NCAA tournament. It's just this draw, this 7-10 feeding into A&M, feeding into Kentucky. My goodness, what a tough path for both of those teams.
Do you describe this year's tournament as wide open, or is it no, it's not wide open? This is Alabama's tournament to win, and then you've got 13 other teams that are playing for second.
Well, I don't know about the 13. I do think it's Alabama's to win. They have not shot the ball well in the last 2 weeks, and I get all the distraction conversation, and who knows if that's played a role or not. I know that they had to meet the media today for the first time, players included, at the SEC tournament. So they're going to have to deal with that, and whether or not that's impacted their shooting, Richard, I don't know. But I know the timelines match up.
Yeah,
they're going to have to fix that. I mean, they're shooting in the 20s in terms of percentage in the last 2 weeks, their last 4 games. They'll have to fix that. But the good news for Alabama, in my view, and the team that if you were asking me what team scares me the most for Alabama and Alabama fans, it would be Mississippi State with the way that they play physically. The fact that they played them twice during the regular season. I think, if I remember right, the Tuscaloosa game was close, like Very. 3 points, and the Mississippi State game, the Starkville game was like 10. So I think they feel like they have a certain formula to maybe match up with their length and strength with Alabama. But Alabama is avoiding Kentucky, A&M, and playing A&M, by the way. Is there a worse root canal for a basketball coach than having to try and score against Buzz Williams' team? But at least, I was on in Lexington yesterday, and I made this point about Kentucky fans. You don't have to beat Arkansas, Auburn, and Texas A&M, all three. You just have to beat one of them.
That's right.
So
that's right.
In that sense, they got the better draw in the bottom half. But I like Alabama's draw in the top half.